Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and you are reading the title of this video right. This is the Inept General, and I have played Total War Warhammer 2. Creative Assembly were nice enough to invite me along to their studio. I got a chance to play the demo they're setting up for E3, for the industry guys to play and for the public to play there as well. So I got a bit of an early look at it, had a chance to play it. Let's go ahead and give you my impressions. But to give you a bit of a heads up before we start, this is one of several videos that have just gone live. This video is about my impressions of the battle I got to play, but we also got to have a very interesting Q&A with Creative Assembly about the campaign and about multiplayer stuff as well. So to see the videos on those, do just check out my latest uploads or check the description below and you'll be able to find them there. If not, top right hand corner where you'll see the video pop up for the campaign now. And you'll be able to see the video pop up for the multiplayer news as well. But for this one, we're just going to stick to my impressions of the battle and what's going on in the battle I got to play for the E3 demo. Now, unfortunately, guys, we don't have any live footage for you today. We will get versions that we got to play, which we recorded to us after E3. So look out for that in a couple of weeks or so. But for now, we just have a couple of lovely screenshots we can show you. But we will talk you through what happened in the battle. So as you can see, we have the Lizardmen here. And I was playing as the Lizardmen, and it was Lizardmen versus the High Elves. Now, it's very much like the battle map that we see in the trailer for Total War Warhammer, the Lizardmen and High Elf trailer. So look out for that. Now you'll see some commonalities. There's the bridge at the beginning. There's the big pyramid in the background with the Pillar of Light. Now this quest was something called a quest battle known as the Fallen Gate. Now a couple of things to point out here. The fact that my guys here, led by Kroq-Gar, and the enemies are effectively a generic High Elf general and two mages that appear later on, and the goal of the mission is to kill those two mages. So just bear that in mind for later. But the beginning aspects of this battle is my Lizardmen charging over a bridge. Now, they have brought back bridge battles in Total War Warhammer 2. They stressed a lot that one of their key focuses for the second game was map variation, and they have tweaked the AI to be able to set up properly, be able to defend a choke point properly, and hold their ground there. So the AI's had a bit of a tweak. It will allow people to make choke point battles in the battle customization map with AI that functions properly. So it's really just a great bit of news all around that. So that's how this battle started. The AI is also slightly randomized. It won't do the same thing every time. Having had a couple of opportunities to play through this battle, the AI not only reacts like sort of mid-battle if you're doing like the same move every time. They, of course, one might assume react the same way, but they don't. So at the very beginning of the battle, they set up a formation on the bridge, and that formation changed a little bit every time I tried it, which I thought was a very interesting aspect of the AI and introducing a little bit of randomness there. But that's a little bit of news about the AI. The first thing you might notice about this screen that you maybe are unfamiliar with as far as Total War Warhammer 2 is this extra little bit over here. Now what this is an army ability. So it seems in Total War Warhammer 2, armies will either through quest battles or through sort of traits or pickups be able to gain army abilities. Now the particular ability of this army was to summon feral cold ones. So that's cold ones without any riders on their back. And the idea is that the Lizardmen, which they do in the lore to a certain extent, have the ability to teleport. So you're teleporting in some feral cold ones into the battlefield, and it's a handy little summon that this army got through a trait it had uniquely. So what the other ones of these traits look like, don't completely know, but this army had the trait where it could summon a couple of feral cold ones during the battle. Now, other than that, you guys will have noticed that we have Kroq-Gar in all his glory with all his gear. Now, Kroq-Gar, the equipable stuff on Kroq-Gar, unfortunately, Total War Warhammer 2 is not the game where we will see equipable stuff on the campaign. If you take it off, it's not there anymore. Or if you put a sword in instead of a spear, you see the sword. We're not going to see equipable stuff change in Total War Warhammer 2, but that's okay. I can kind of live with that. It'd be a nice little extra to have, but that's all right. Now, moving on to Kroq-Gar's abilities, you guys will have seen over here. Now, he can summon lightning, much like Kholek Suneater. Now, off the top of my head, guys, I'll be honest, I kind of got involved in fighting the battle, so I can't quite remember if this is the Hands of God ability that Kroq-Gar has in the tabletop of the game. But the Hands of the Gods in the tabletop allowed him to shoot the spell Shen's Burning Gaze, which you guys will know if you played a lot of Light Wizards, that is a missile spell. So I can't remember off the top of my head if this stands in for it, or at this point in the battle, Kroq-Gar didn't have that magical item yet, and this was just another ability he has anyway. Can't remember whether it's a stand-in, guys. I apologize for that. Once I get hold of the footage, I'll be able to answer that definitively. But if it is, it's much like the way Colex worked. You place it over units, lightning comes down and does damage to them. The other ability he has is this one next to it, which is regen. So he has 2 opportunities to regen a unit, whether it's him or whether it's just an allied unit. He can offer some regenerative abilities there. Now, as far as playing as Kroq-Gar, he was solid. He was great. He could get some great work done. Again, in this point, he wasn't quite up to taking on an army all by himself. They could nail him. They could kill him. It would take a lot of ganging up. But Kroq-Gar was pretty solid, could charge through enemy lines, do a lot of damage. He could be half health, and what we will see later on, I'm going to discuss it when I get to the High Elves bit of the video, guys, but like he has to fight a Sun Dragon at one point. Now, I'll get into a bit of detail about the dragons later on, as I say, but even at half health, he could take down that Sun Dragon and then still go and like charge down the enemy general and do some great work there. I had a couple of battles where he was taking on both of those characters, still managed to pull through and survive, and pretty much ended all of them. Now, so he has a very powerful charge. The Carnosaur does a great little jump animation when it's getting into battle, which I thought was fantastic. So he charges along. Animations are great. Animations are great when he's fighting the Sun Dragon. Animations are great when he's fighting a unit. They look great, that is. The one thing I did find a touch, maybe not perplexing, but off about Kroq-Gar was that he has some animations where he's throwing individual soldiers in the air, the Carnosaur is, and then like eating them, chewing them up, and like spitting them out. But that can take a little bit of time, and if you have a fleet-footed unit like the Elves can be, they could get quite a bit of distance between themselves and Kroq-Gar over the time he was doing that animation. So I'm not sure if in the final version of the game they might speed that animation up a little bit, but it just left him a little bit not quite in the middle doing the maximum amount of damage all the time, particularly if units were trying to get away from him because he got locked into certain animations. That said, the animations did look great, but that's just a slightly thing that he could get maybe isolated some ways. He could fall behind the rest of your troops. He's not necessarily sticking in much like maybe like a cavalry unit might do when attacking a unit moving away from them. He can get distracted by his own animations. So just something to watch out for when playing as Kroq-Gar. Maybe it won't even be an issue when the full game comes out. So as I said, great animations, love playing as Kroq-Gar. He could get some solid work done. Now the other thing I just want to point out, because this is probably the best shot of it we have in the series of screenshots I'm allowed to use today, is the solar engine here in the background. Now got a chance to see what this piece of artillery looked like. It can do some solid damage. You have to kind of watch out for them not getting too close to the battle because fleeing troops can distract them. They're not necessarily firing, they're sort of fighting off in melee fleeing troops and stuff like that. But it does some solid damage, but it's not a Luminarch of Hysh, guys. Once you get a chance to get your hands on Total War Warhammer 2, don't think it's a Luminarch just because it's kind of a beam weapon as well. It doesn't do as much damage. It does more damage akin to, say, maybe a cannon. That's trying to think of it off the top of my head now. I can't get any solid numbers for you in terms of the like values of damage it was doing at the moment, but yeah, it wasn't just blowing stuff away like the Luminarch of Hysh can. You put it up against big targets, it wasn't sort of annihilating half their health with one hit, but it still was fairly solid, did some great work in the battlefield. The Bastilodon itself as a way of carrying vehicles around is great, a little bit slower than any of the other larger creatures, but you know what, that's the way it should be. But solid way of getting artillery around the battlefield and a good little piece of artillery. But as I said, it's not doing Luminarch of Hysh levels of damage. Now, moving on to the next shot, guys. we have this lovely shot of the battle here. As you see, this is us just taking over the bridge, charging up to the pyramid in the back, where we are trying to take down the High Elves. As you can see on the right, the cooldown had finished on us summoning the feral Cold Ones. This isn't all one coherent battle, by the way, these screenshots are taken from. It's sort of multiple different angles, multiple different events, not even necessarily from the same type of battle I fought myself. But it does give you a good idea, and it is on the same battle map. So on the right, you can see the cooldown for the feral Cold Ones being able to be teleported in, active. You can see some of the other units we have on the battlefield. A couple of things to draw your attention to on this, guys, is this. Now, this little exclamation point on the stegodon shows that it's in Rampage mode. Now, we heard a little bit about Rampage mode from Creative Assembly a little bit earlier, in that Rampage mode is when Lizardmen units effectively lose enough health that they start to have a kind of morale failure, and they just go charging after the nearest enemy, and you lose control of that unit. Now, this was very important to talk about because it really does affect the way the Lizardmen play quite a lot. They rampage more than perhaps one might expect at first, but they are still solid, and they do come back fairly quickly. But the aspect it introduces is it introduces quite a necessity to be quite good at micro. Not to the point that you need to be maybe with, say, a Wood Elf army, but you need to be constantly paying attention for when your stuff is coming back, when it's gone out of control. Because unlike some of the armies in Total War Warhammer 1, where you could kind of forget parts of the battlefield because you know what's going on, you can look away, you know your spearmen are going to be there till they give up the ghost or they die or they run away. But for the most part, you know they're going to stay where they are. For this rampaging stuff, that's not the case. So your unit can just end up in a completely different part of the battlefield if you're not paying attention to where they are and how you can best use them. And when they've come back, they could just be getting shot by archers if you're not right on it with when they've come back into the game. So very important aspect to remember about Lizardmen gameplay is that keep track of what's on Rampage, spend a lot of time looking at the portraits, see what's on Rampage, see what's come back, check the minimap. It adds an element of micromanagement I didn't expect for the Lizardmen. I expect they'd be much more of a meaty army to be able to just sort of hold the line, charge through, much more like a sort of more ferocious dwarven army kind of thing. But no, the Rampage thing does play an important element, and you do have to try and stay on top of it. So that's just something to bear in mind if you're going to pick Lizardmen for your first playthrough. And that's the, just in the, in the red circle there, guys, you can see the stegodon icon has like a little red fluorescent ring about it. That's what it looks like on the battlefield when something's rampaging. There's just this little iridescent red glow around the unit banner. So that's what it is, and the stegodon's somewhere over there. It's behind the Sun Dragon. That's your first shot of the Sun Dragon, guys. And the dragons in the game, all dragons, even in the larger campaign map, if you own Total War Warhammer 1 and Total War Warhammer 2, all dragons have been retroactively done, so they all have breath attacks you can aim, not unlike the breath spells that we have at the moment. So you'll be able to aim the breath attacks of dragons. I think that's a great addition. I was super happy to hear about that when I saw it. So dragons can aim. As for other creatures with breath attacks in the tabletop, which is what the dragons had, they said that they think the dragons might be the only one, but I wouldn't be surprised if that was including the Hydra. The guys I asked the question to were a bit iffy about it, but not everything that in Total War Warhammer 1 and Total War Warhammer 2, which has breath attack on the tabletop, has breath attack in the game. All dragons across every army will be updated to have breath attacks. Now, that's only if you own Total War Warhammer 2, bear in mind. That's not going to be retroactively brought into Total War Warhammer 1, just the Total War Warhammer 1 armies, which you can play as on the Grand Campaign map, which will be a combination map when you own both copies of the game. That will be released a few weeks after the game comes out. So just bear that in mind, guys. I hope I explained that adequately. That sounded like a bit of a rant when I was saying it, but I hope you get the gist. So here we have a nice shot of the feral bastilodon, guys. Now, this guy is slow, so he will not catch archers. Don't send him after archers. You can send him towards archers just to be a damage sponge, because they are very resilient against missile fire. I used the feral bastilodon really just to go ahead of my army, take a lot of damage, absorb a lot of missile fire, and just prove a bit of a distraction overall. Kind of maybe like a zombie unit, but a bit more fun and a bit more resilient. So that is the feral bastilodon. They can do some damage if you get them into melee. Try not to get them in against any anti-large, but they can do a good amount of damage. They have a decent enough charge, but just bear in mind that they're not going to catch anything really. Maybe short of a couple of Dawi, but they're not really going to catch anything. So use them more as a distraction for missile fire. Get them into melee. They can lend a little bit of help, but not necessarily the most sort of go-to unit you want up there. Next up, we have the Skinks over here. This is probably the closest shot of Skinks we have in my selection of screenshots to be able to use, guys. Now, the Skinks have short range. They're relatively quick. And they have poison, but they can lay down a lot of damage. If you actually get them firing, if you manage to protect them from cav charges, they can really do a lot of damage on a unit. If they can get close enough, they really are very effective. I have them in a couple of battles. I struggled to deal with the Sun Dragon you see in the background there, but the Skinks working together really just started draining away the Sun Dragon's life very, very quickly. So very effective, good at dealing damage. It's just a matter of getting them close enough into range that they don't enter combat and protecting them from any cavalry, because they can run away from most infantry units. They'll be able to do that, but cavalry is definitely a problem for the Skinks. But great little unit, love a good Skink. We had a couple of missile Skinks in this battle, huge amount of fun to use them. And yeah, they can lay down a very effective level of fire. Here, guys, we have a lovely shot of the Saurus warriors charging into battle against the Silverhelms. This is a lovely little shot of the Silverhelms coming in. Now, the Saurus warriors might struggle with this fight. The Silverhelms can do quite well against infantry. So the Silverhelms can do quite well against infantry. But they will struggle against something like the Temple Guard, obviously, because that's a halberdier unit against the spears. But the Saurus warriors are good. I was trying to get, it was hard to get an idea of how they might hold up against some of the first game's races. All I could put them up against was really basic spearmen, and they did well against these spearmen. Even Saurus with spears did very well against basic elven spearmen. But they, again, it was either spearmen or swordmasters of Hoth. Now, the Swordmasters destroyed basic Saurus, as they probably should do, as did maybe the White Lions. But the Saurus were pretty solid. If I was to guess, and this is just off the top of my head, I'd say they'd maybe be a touch below Chaos Warriors, but not much. And then they'd probably be the next echelon there in terms of basic infantry. I think they could probably take on most other things in a one-on-one fight. I think they could probably take on swordsmen quite handily. I think great swords they'd probably struggle with as a more elite unit. But they could take on swordsmen. They could maybe take on Graveguard with shields. But I wouldn't want to bet my house on it. But it'd be fairly close. But they're around that kind of area. But it'll be interesting to see once I get the video released to me, guys. Once I can compare some stats. And I'll do a stat comparison up for you guys on the channel as well. But they were solid. They did impress me. They did some good work when they weren't rampaging. So Sauruses look great. A bit more hunched over than I maybe anticipated in the modeling of them. But I don't think it deters from the way they look at all. I think it's quite cool the way they sort of charge into battle. They too do a little kind of toe first, raptor-like attack, jump into battle. It looks pretty great. So I had a lot of fun playing with the Saurus warriors with hand weapons. Now, we had an opportunity to do Saurus warriors with shields. They'll take on Elven warriors with shields, no problem. They'll demolish them. And they'll do quite well against large, of course. They do, like all spearmen, have large, anti-large, anti-charge. The spearmen Saurus do. So that's something to bear in mind. They're a pretty handy unit, the spearmen Saurus. And you can see their portrait card. They're the second and third on the left. In case you wanted to know what their portrait card looked like. So here, guys, we have a few things going on. We have Kroq-Gar back in the picture. We also have the Temple Guard here. This is kind of the best shot of the Temple Guard I could really get, I'm afraid, guys. But they were impressive. They were solid. They did well against infantry. They did brilliantly against cav. They could destroy any cav they went up against in this battle. But the best cav the High Elf had in this battle were the Silver Helms. No sign of the Dragon Princes, but that might be an interesting matchup of sorts. Very impressed with the Temple Guard. They behaved exactly as I thought they might. They were a hugely effective force on the battlefield, did a lot of damage to almost any unit they came up against, including the Swordmasters of Hoth and the White Lions. They really did well, held their own. Now, I couldn't tell you because it wasn't just a proper battle who would come out on top one-on-one against any of those high elite elven units. But they helped out where they could, and really, when they joined the fight, that's when the Lizardmen started winning those types of melee exchanges. On the left, we have the Feral Stegodon. Now, this is just a Stegodon without anything on its back. It could do some good work. It has an adorable animation, like running animation, that really does just look like a kind of really chubby puppy, just like eager to get, like fetch a ball or something. There's a little bit of a chortle in the room when he first saw it, but not in a negative way. I think people found it great. And he has a great little running animation, very different to the bastilodon in the way it moves. It's pretty rapid. It can catch all infantry. It would struggle to catch cav, but you shouldn't really need it to. It has a huge charge. Fantastic charge against any enemy line, and really can get some solid work done. Tended to rampage a fair amount in the battle we had, and the example shot you saw there. But on the whole, a really handy little unit to have. Particularly, I got the impression the Lizardmen army was kind of a medium tier army. It wasn't all elites, it was a medium to high tier army. And the Feral Stegodon did some great work in that. So a great little unit to have, pretty handy. Used maybe similarly to the way the Vargulf was in Total War Warhammer 1. And here, guys, you get a bit of a clearer idea of the bridge we were charging across. We have the Pterodons here flying overhead, doing some great work. And we had the Fire Bowler version in this battle, and they would do area of effect explosions when their missiles hit the ground. So you can potentially do a lot of damage to your own unit. So something to watch out for with that particular variety of Pterodon rider. But they have a great attack that way. Don't put them up against archers, but if you can isolate the archers and get them in against some infantry, they could be potentially devastating. The Fire Slug Bowler versions we got to play with in this battle. Little explosions on the ground, great little area effects, could potentially do a lot of damage. Great against missiles themselves, if you can get them charged in doing melee, much like the Eagle Riders of the Wood Elves. These guys can do a bit of both. Fire from range against missile units. Don't try and outshoot them, that won't work, but get them involved in melee and they'll pretty much do over a archery unit if they're given the opportunity. But real quick, real fun to play with. I didn't notice during the battle, I might get a chance to see it when we get our footage back, but I didn't notice during the battle that spinning, that cool little dive spin they did in the trailer. I'm not sure if that's an animation they can do in-game, but they were a handy unit, and, you know, yeah, very much reminded me of the Hawk Riders of the Wood Elves. I think they're about the same number of them in a unit as well, and they do have the bombardment where they drop the big rock. Works exactly like the gyrocopter. One shot, though, on all of them. They all drop their rock at the same time, and that's it. It's a bit self-explanatory, guys. Has the bombing attack of a gyrocopter. A little bit of an area effect on the upgraded version, because you will get javelin versions of these guys as well. But the upgraded Red Slug Bowler version will do fire damage, and will do area of effect damage as well. So a real handy unit to have. Now, this was a shot we got. This isn't in the battle I played, but it's a shot along the same themes, and it will allow me to talk about the cavalry, the cold ones. So you may have seen in the portraits that I showed you in some of the shots before that there were some Cold One riders that become available to you in the battle at some point. These are the upgraded version, I have to assume. These are the Horned One riders. So these guys will be, it looks like, a little bit more armored, maybe a little slower, but probably a bit more effective in melee combat as well. Probably a shock cavalry, if I were to guess. But I didn't get to see these guys on the battlefield. But the Cold One Riders were fast. They can take down a unit of Silver Helms, I'm pretty sure. They were good. They're not as quick necessarily as Cav, but the Cold Ones did a good job. And were very effective fighting once you got them into combat. Super good cavalry. And I think the variety we got were the spears, the Cold One with spears. So that's what we had, and they were probably more effective at charging. I can't remember the stats off the top of my head, guys, but got to play with cold ones, did a great job as cavalry, really effective once they're actually in combat, can do a lot of damage, and really a very handy unit to have. So there are 3 types in that battle. There's the feral cold ones, there was the cold ones with spears, and these I assume are the horned cold ones, as we have seen when the Lizardmen roster was revealed. If you haven't seen the full roster lineup yet, do check the top right-hand corner now, and that'll take you to my breakdown of the roster reveal. But as I said, guys, in this battle, we didn't get to use everything. We didn't get to use everything at the Lizardmen disposal, but we got to have a go with saurus with spears, saurus with hand weapons, skinks with missiles, cold ones, feral and spears, bastilodon solar engine, feral bastilodon, feral stegodon, and Kroq-Gar, as well as, and that's really about it with the saurus ones in there as well. So it was a great little battle to have, and this is us going across the bridge. Again, great shot of the sun dragon there. Now, whether that means there's going to be a moon and a star dragon, which for those of you who don't know are kind of older dragons in the High Elf army book, sort of more experienced, a bit hardier than the sun dragon. The sun dragon's idea is that they're the young dragons. So I'm not sure if we'll see those, but we did see the sun dragon, and the fire effect is different from anything we've seen before as well. It really looked fantastic, just like raining down from the mouth of the dragon on anything below it. It was a great little unit to see, great animations on the sun dragon. They have obviously done some work with dragons, and even I think, unless I was fooled by my eyes, the animations against big creatures fighting other big creatures, the Kroq-Gar and the sun dragon fighting really looked pretty good. As you'll notice, I can't remember if I mentioned this earlier, guys, the sun dragon does not have a rider on it. So one has to assume, much like the dinosaurs in the Lizardmen army, in the High Elf army, there will be a variety of dragon known as like maybe the feral dragon or whatever they want to call it, where it doesn't have a rider on its back and is just a dragon by itself. So there will be that ability in Total War Warhammer 2 of dragons without riders. Moving on to chat a little bit about the High Elf army. We had High Elf archers, a lot of High Elf units we've seen in the trailer, but not great shots of them here. So we did have the High Elf archers doing a lot of work. Now this battle was really staggered into sort of 3 separate unit collections as we fought our way up the hill. But in this shot, we can also see the elven mages. In the battlefield, the only magic I noticed was the fire vortex, which could be the fire vortex from the sort of bright wizard lore, the fire lore of magic, or it could be just a representation of a high elf form of magic, which might be a representation of the Tempest, but I'm not 100% sure on that, guys. So I figured that the vortex was either the same vortex we've had amongst fire mages, but we also got to see, and I don't have a shot of it, I'm sorry guys, the high lore of magic, fiery convocation, where it works in Total War Warhammer, not like it does on the tabletop, but it's very much like the Winds of Death spell, but with a flaming phoenix that's born into shape and then sort of does damage along the ground as it flies over. And that works very much like the Winds of Death. You kind of point it in a direction relative to where your caster is, and it goes off and does the spell. So potentially huge amounts of damage dealing there with the fiery convocation. The other spells they mentioned, but I didn't get a chance to see, was apparently the High Elves will have access to a magical spell known as the Hammer of Vol. Now Vol is kind of the smithy god of the High Elves, but what the Hammer of Vol does is apparently it's available during siege battles, and if you manage to cast it, I imagine it has quite a high cost, but if you manage to cast it, it can effectively knock down a section of wall. So that would be an interesting spell to see. But again, I didn't get a chance to see that implemented. That's just something they mentioned in the Q&A session there, guys. So another little bit of High Elf magic there. But these are the 2 mages that the goal was to kill in the battle. As you can see, guys, chariots of Pterodon are a mount for the mages. So that's something to bear in mind. We know one of their upgrade paths now is going to have the chariot as a mount. Now, there have been some changes to Total War Warhammer's 2 magic system, but I'm not going to go into that in this video, guys. Check out my campaign information video to get a bit more details on how the upgrade tree is going to work for magicians, for mages, and how that's changed from Total War Warhammer 1. But these are the 2 mages we were hunting after. They could be fairly effective with their magic and these chariots. But yeah, quite hard to pin down once they were around the battlefield. Could do a bit of damage, but was really trying to hunt those guys. As you can see, some spearmen. We've got the Pterodons there in the background. We've got the Skinks apparently involved in a bit of a fight. Loads of saurus about, so right in the middle of all the fighting there, and the vortex, the fire vortex going off there. Here I think is a relatively similar shot, but the one thing I wanted to point out in this video, guys, is, so in the bottom left here, guys, we have Illyrian Reavers. Now, they haven't been confirmed so far in Total War Warhammer 2, but they are effectively the High Elf army's light cav, so they can charge around at high speed, catching up with things. Now, these guys all seem to be armed with lances in the battle I played, but there are elements of them that can be allowed to have bows. Now, whether that's a different type of Illyrian Reaver we'll get later on down the line, or a different variety, or you'll be able to upgrade where one has lance and bows, I'm not 100% sure. But all we saw in this battle was the variety with lances, or spears if you prefer. And yeah, typical light cav, quick, maneuverable, going around the battlefield, getting work done. And here's them just a little bit closer in, taking on a unit of saurus. Now guys, that about sums it up for the units that appear in the screenshots. I've spoken through everything, I think, at this point. Now, there were a couple of other units I got to see in my playthrough, but we don't unfortunately have them featured in the screenshots. And I've mentioned them a couple of times in the course of the video, but they were the White Lions, which looked pretty amazing in the game, Total War Warhammer 2. And they were the Sword Masters. Now, these guys all look great. The Sword Masters looked fantastic. Face coverings, non-face coverings. They could get some work done if I didn't have Kroq-Gar in there just munching down on them. Same with the White Lions. Now, as to their specific stats, I can't remember them off the top of my head, guys, but as I said, I will get access to the footage, and in that footage, there'll be stats, and we'll be able to start comparing them against maybe some of the armies in Total War Warhammer 1, or even just more direct comparisons against some of the Lizardmen. But that about does it for my impressions of the battle, guys. Really loved it. Very nice of CA to have me round. Super excited to look for the game. I think for me, the biggest surprise was just the element of micro needed for the Lizardmen, just to get them going where you wanted them to once they rampage, just keeping track of who's rampaging when they've come off rampage to get them back in the fight. All of just that little element of extra micro that was slightly unexpected, but not necessarily unwelcome. It just adds an element of attention needed for the Lizardmen army. That took me a little bit of a surprise, but someone could get used to very quickly. Again, the High Elves were able to hold the line very well. Archers of the High Elves doing a lot of damage if you couldn't break through their lines. We also saw the Eagle Bolt Thrower not doing huge amounts of damage, but for the most part I had them firing at bastilodons that I'd sent forward, and the bastilodons are fairly hardy against any kind of missile fire. So that was really how I played that one. But there were the bolt throwers in the fight. Didn't get to control them, so don't know about their firing modes or anything like that yet, guys. But yeah, they were in the battle, and they will be available in the footage I'll be able to show you guys after E3. But hope you guys like my impressions. I'm super excited for the Lizardmen. It was hugely fun to play them. Kroq-Gar is a boss. Could get a lot of work done in that battle. Super impressed by him. And really looking forward to getting my hands on them properly and going through a campaign with you guys. But do check out my other two videos, guys. I have a lot of new information on the campaign and a lot of fun information on the multiplayer. Well, one huge bit of big news on the multiplayer rather than a lot, and a couple of little bits as well. Do check out those videos. Again, click on the top right or check in the description below. As always, guys, huge thank you for watching, and special thanks to John, Reese, Colin, Thomas, Mateus, Samuel, Matthews, David, and Peter. Thank you guys for supporting me that extra little bit, and I hope to catch everybody on the next video. Alright guys, thanks very much.